Welcome to the introductory episode of the How to Fight with a Longsword series. In this episode, I will tell you what this series is all about, and I also go through some of the general things you should know before starting with the series. I have split this episode into chapters, which you can find in the description. I recommend that you use the timestamps to jump through the subjects that interest you. At the very least, I recommend that you watch the How to Train and Required Gear sections. But without further ado, let's get to business. In this series, I will be teaching you how to fight according to the German longsword tradition. More specifically, the Lichtenauer tradition. What this basically means is that this style of longsword fencing is based on the Zettel, which is attributed to Johannes Lichtenauer. The Zettel is a mnemonic poem which contains his teachings. More specifically, we study 15th century manuscripts written by multiple people. These manuscripts contain a gloss of the Zettel. A gloss is simply a more clear explanation of the cryptic poem. I have used the glosses by Pseudo Peter von Danzig, Sigmund Einringek, and Pseudo Hans Döbringer as the material for the series. I will be referring to these three texts as Danzig, Ringek, and Döbringer. The last episode of this series will go a bit more in depth with the sources. For now, it is enough to know that there are multiple texts in the tradition, and in some cases they contradict each other. If you are interested in the manuscripts, I have links to them in the description. There is also other material in the Lichtenauer tradition available. A well-known example is a 16th century fencing master Joachim Meyer. My opinion on the sources I teach and study is that they still have very close ties to the personal defense application of the art. That can be either in civilian or military life or in a judicial duel. That is also the lens through which I interpret the sources. What that very simply means is that I teach the use of a weapon, and that weapon is a longsword. I don't specifically teach the use of modern or historical sports equipment, even though that is what we use to train. From that, we get to the goals of the series. My very generic goal with the series is to offer an easy-to-follow tutorial series on Lichtenauer tradition longsword fencing. More specifically, I want to offer a single series which can teach anyone the basic skills and concepts on how to fight with a longsword. As such, consider this series a basic course to German longsword fencing. This series does not require any previous knowledge in fencing or any other martial art, or in sports in general. If you want to learn to use a longsword, this is the place to start. The last part of this episode, course structure, explains how to take a single video and turn it into a lesson. It also explains how to take the whole series and how to turn it into a basic course. You have my permission to take this series and use it as a base for a basic course of your own. You can even take the series as is and teach it forwards. As such, it is good to understand that the episodes of this series are structured so that they can be taught in 90 minutes. This places some limitations on what is taught and how, but more about that in the course structure section. As already mentioned, I'm teaching longsword from the point of view of using a weapon. I'm not trying to optimize my teaching for modern competitive HEMA. As such, I also cover subjects which might not be optimal in modern tournament setting. If you are interested in sharp swords and how to use a sword as a weapon, I have a link to my How to Cut with a Longsword series in the description. One important goal of this series is to get you to spar as early as possible. This is because the only way to learn to fence is to fence. You can spend the rest of your life doing paired drills, but you won't learn how to fight with a sword if you don't fight with a sword. Naturally, dueling with sharp swords is in no way safe, so sparring with modern protective equipment and training gear is the best thing we have. That being said, this series is designed so that the only required gear is a mask and a training sword. The first and most important rule is, if it hurts, don't do it. You do not want to hurt yourself. As such, if any technique causes pain, do not perform the technique. This is part of the most important rule: safety first. You must always handle the training sword so that it is in your control. You must be able to stop your attacks if need be. You must regulate the strength of your attack so that you do not hurt your training partner. If your partner says you are hitting too hard, you are hitting too hard. Related to that, I highly recommend that you watch my video on how to warm up for HEMA training. The link is in the description. As already said, sparring is the only way to learn to fence. If you only do static paired drills, you will learn to do drills. This gets us to decision drills. I have multiple such drills built into the series. Decision drills are simply exercises which have multiple options. Basically, your training partner has 2 or more options they can choose from. You need to then react to the decision they made. This is a way to simulate limited sparring situations in a simple paired drill. This also forces you to think and react instead of just blindly repeating a movement pattern. By using drills like these, you can start to slowly build up automatic answers to specific actions from your opponent. This is what leads to effective fencing, as you don't always have the time to think during an actual fencing situation. The coach or the target in a paired drill has a very important role to play. They can easily break the exercise if they don't pay attention to what they are doing. Basically, every fencing technique requires a specific situation to work. If the coach doesn't properly present the situation, the technique will not work. It is rather common to hear the phrase, "But if I do this, then it no longer works," when teaching a class. This is an example of changing the situation to something the technique no longer works in. It doesn't mean that the technique is bad, it is just not meant for this new situation. As such, when you are playing the role of the coach, pay attention to what you are doing and do it as instructed. Be especially mindful of this when, as a coach, you must perform an attack. It is rather common to stop making proper attacks and start doing something else. Another thing to pay attention to is that when you know what your partner is going to do, it is very easy to react to it. Even in a decision drill, it is often trivial for the coach to parry the attacks from the trainee. This doesn't mean that the technique is bad, it simply means that the coach already knows what is going to happen, or at least has a very limited amount of possibilities to react to. This makes reacting very easy. The last thing is the intensity of the drills. As a rule of thumb, the trainee should succeed 70 to 80% of the time. If they don't, slow down the drill. If they succeed all the time, speed up the exercise. You can start with very slow execution to learn the movement pattern. After you can do the movement pattern, try to speed the exercise up. After learning the movement pattern, you want to get the exercise to a nice relaxed speed so that it doesn't feel slow. After that, you want to start slowly increasing the speed of the exercise as long as you keep succeeding at least 70% of the time and the exercise stays safe. The series is designed so that it requires minimal equipment. The only things you need are a sword simulator and a mask. Check the description for links to the gear I mention. As a disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by any of the companies I mention. I mention them because I like their products. If you decide to buy any of this equipment, I'm not going to get anything from it. For a sword, I recommend a feather if you can afford one. I have used Quetun feathers for years and can recommend them. They are excellent. Quetun also has first-class customer support and warranty. There are also a variety of other manufacturers to choose from. I have personally owned and used a Regenier feather, but that was years ago. Some of my friends have Sigi feathers, and based on a quick test, they seem to be good. I have links to all of those in the description. A noticeably cheaper option is to get a synthetic longsword. At EHMS, we use these to run the basic course as they work just fine for the purpose and they allow us to arm the whole basic course. I have experience with the Black Fencer synthetic longswords and I can highly recommend them. For a mask, a Red Dragon HEMA fencing mask is a very affordable option. EHMS has quite a few of those as loaner masks and they work just fine for that. I would personally not go to a competition with one, but for the purposes of this basic course, one will do just fine. Another option for HEMA masks is PBT. Their masks are completely suitable for tournament use, but they are also quite a lot more expensive. A great thing about the Black Fencer synthetics and the Red Dragon masks is that you can get them a bit cheaper if you buy them in packs. You can get the masks in a pack of 5 and the swords in a pack of 10 for a small discount. This is great if you want to buy a bunch of club loaners or if you have a group of friends you want to start fencing with. When you buy a mask, make sure that it fits properly. Your nose should not be in contact with the mesh and your chin should fit in. If you lean forwards and shake your head, the mask shouldn't shake around loosely. If you press from the front of the mask, your nose shouldn't come in contact with the mesh. A poorly fitting mask will move around if you shake your head, and your nose and or chin will come in contact with the mesh when the mask is pushed towards your face. Naturally, a too small of a mask will not fit you. You might be able to get it on, but you can't fit your chin in, or your nose and or chin will be in contact with the mesh. If you decide to buy extra protective equipment, in addition to the required gear, here are the two most important pieces: a throat protector and fencing gloves. Throat protectors are relatively cheap and they add extra protection, especially for the thrusting drills. A good choice is a PBT throat protector. I have used one for years and it has worked just fine. Naturally, the idea of gloves is to keep your fingers safe. The bad thing is that these tend to cost quite a lot, at least good ones. The Red Dragon gloves shown on the screen right now are a do not buy example. These are not suitable for longsword fencing. Do not buy these for that use. It doesn't mean that the product is bad, it simply is not suitable for longsword fencing. I'm mentioning these as these come up every now and then when talking about beginner gloves. One of the most used glove types, at least in Europe, is the mitten style sparring glove. With open palm gloves like these, I highly recommend that you use an underglove. I simply use a €5 pair of gardening gloves and they have served me just fine for multiple years. A very good and widely used option is the Spes Heavy Glove. They are a bit heavier and bulkier, but you won't need an underglove. They are a very good and protective glove. A new on the market option is from Quetchen. It is also a closed glove, so you won't be needing an underglove. As I already mentioned, you have my full approval to use this series as a base to run your own classes or even a full basic course. I even provide a lesson plan in the description of every single video. If you do, I would appreciate if you told your students about my channel, but that is in no way mandatory. Before we get to the actual structure of the basic course, a very important note. In the videos, I explain things in more detail than I would during a class. During a class, I try to keep the explanation short and then show a few examples. People can then ask questions if need be. When the participants are drilling, I then go around the class and correct any mistakes I see. If I notice a trend of incorrect execution, I may pause the drilling for the whole class and correct everyone at once. Naturally, this is not possible with a YouTube video. Because of that, I go a bit more in depth with my explanations, and I also show the most common mistakes. Now the course structure itself. The basic course is designed to run for 8 weeks, 2 training sessions each week. As such, this series has 16 episodes, 1 for each class. The last 2 sessions, so week 8, is dedicated to sparring. As such, the 15th episode will explain sparring in detail. The 16th episode will take a look at the historical sources. The lessons are designed to fit into 90 minutes. The lessons start with 10 to 15 minutes of warm-up, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of recap for the previous lesson. The recap makes it less of an issue for people to miss a class. For the warming up portion, please refer to my warming up video. The link is in the description. Each lesson ends with 5 minutes reserved for a feedback session. The idea is to gather everyone around so that they can give a short feedback on the lesson. Anything from "I had fun, training was good, thank you," to "the warm-up was a bit too intense and I would have liked a bit more time dedicated to this specific exercise as it was a bit difficult," is great feedback. This leaves 55 to 65 minutes for the actual contents of the class. As already mentioned, every single episode will have a rough schedule in the description. Do note that these times are not absolute. You can and should make adjustment based on the participants. Sometimes I might decide to drop a more difficult drill to give more time for an easier version, if it seems that the people are struggling. Other times I might throw in an extra drill if it seems that the participants are catching on particularly quickly. Before we get into recap, go and stab that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. In this series, I teach you to fight according to the Lichtenauer tradition of longsword fencing. More specifically, the sources I use are Pseudo Peter von Danzig, Sigmund Einringerk, and Pseudo Hans Döbringer. The only gear you are going to need is a mask and a training sword. If you want to get extra gear, I recommend that you get a throat protector and fencing gloves. When training, safety is your first priority. Remember that you are handling a training tool for a weapon. The series is structured to form an 8-week long basic course. There are 16 lessons, each 90 minutes long. Naturally, you can adjust this to your specific needs. You have my full permission to use this series as a base for your own teaching. You can take the material and adapt it to your own needs. You can take a single episode and teach it as a lesson. Or you can even take the whole series and teach it as a basic course. If you do, I would appreciate if you recommend my channel, but it is in no way mandatory.